Welcome to this online seminar on critical thinking and why it might be relevant to your practice as a music therapist. Today we're going to cover what is critical thinking, intersectional theory and acknowledging our privilege, normativity and its impact on trauma, power and empowerment beyond the therapy room, application in music therapy practice, the expert model, access and advocacy, the recovery model in mental health, anti-oppressive practices and how we can help clients negotiate restrictive structures, watching our clinical language. After this tutorial, you'll probably have a better sense of how critical thinking is relevant to your work, and particularly in some contexts, and the kinds of language that's being used currently to describe critical theory in real-world contexts, which you might have been seeing on your Facebook page or in Instagram posts or all around us, where critical thinking is becoming a part of the contemporary discourse, particularly of young people, but of everybody. Discussions of inclusion and equity and social justice are thankfully becoming more common. In the introductory video, I began by acknowledging a number of privileges and most certainly acknowledging the land on which I'm recording this video, which is that land of the Wurundjeri people, and that it is, I believe, and always has been, Aboriginal land. In that introductory video, I also acknowledged a number of other privileges, not only my white skin, my cisgendered status, as well as my middle-class upbringing. And I also acknowledged that I've experienced depression at the hands of the patriarchy, particularly as a single mum and more generally as a woman. What I'd like to do now in terms of introductions is to really speak about and locate myself in relation to this topic, because I feel as though critical thinking has been a huge leap for me as somebody who came into practice with a deep strengths orientation, which was absolutely reinforced by my training and by all of the sectors that I've worked in since, including the medical sector. And that my preferred theoretical orientation has generally been humanism, and that emphasising the inherent potential in all persons for a long time seemed like an adequate framework for my practice. But the world is changing, and there are a number of social movements going on all around us related to feminism and ableism and racism, and looking to unpack issues like homophobia and heteronormativity. So it feels as though humanism is a little more naive than I originally intended for it to be as far as taking a stance is concerned. And whilst in the realms of psychology, humanism is probably still the dominant theoretical framework to which I relate, music therapy academics around the world and music therapy practitioners have been expanding the influences on their practice well beyond psychology, I would say. And we've been influenced by a range of different fields, such as social work and youth work, and also of different disciplines, such as sociology, anthropology, and other more humanities-oriented fields where there's a strong evidence, a strong emphasis, on objectivism and being able to generalise and prove, into fields where social justice is much more relevant and important in terms of being an influence on the ways that we approach practice. So I feel as though I've been on quite a journey in terms of discovering how and why and in what ways critical thinking is relevant to practice as a music therapist. And I wanted to use that as a way of explaining my position to you this time, in addition to acknowledging my privileges. So, fundamentally, I come to this conversation as a music therapist. And as you can see here, my music therapy training began on a very non-dominant instrument, which is the old Salvation Army tambourine, which belonged to my nana, who was the musician of our family, from whom apparently it came to me. And then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, right, however you're seeing it, just want to acknowledge too that in my training I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And in many ways I consider that to be a great strength that I bring to my work, my practice, my research, even my teaching, is a huge amount of humility in terms of constantly realising that there's even more that I don't know, but that I'm often seeking to understand. And I think that critical thinking is the latest step that I've taken to seek to understand the ways in which music can afford the most powerful opportunities for the people with whom we work. As you can see, my confidence grew across these photos in many ways, and my skills, I hope, and culminating with a PhD at the University of Melbourne with Professor Denise Grokey, who you can see in the middle there. But I come to this conversation very much grounded in practice as a music therapist. So bringing this theoretical layer, but really in terms of practice. I also come to this conversation as a lecturer and somebody who can talk for a long time, and as an author, somebody who can write for a long time. So this is just 3 of the books that I've written in which there's not a lot of evidence of critical thought, or perhaps if you were generous, you might say that there's increasing evidence of critical thought. And certainly the text Creating Music Cultures in the Schools with Daphne Ricks and my colleague, who's located not by accident next to New Zealand there on the map, brings in the most critical view thus far. But I certainly don't consider myself to be a leading critical theorist in terms of my writing, but rather that writing gives you the opportunity to process thoughts, or at least for me, writing allows me to process my thoughts in relation to issues. And I've been thinking a lot as a lecturer and an author, and somebody who has the opportunity and the privilege of travelling around the world to hear what people are talking about, and that writing has allowed me to really develop that thinking. And finally, I really think of myself as being an advocate for access to music for all persons. My practices and research have been often located with young persons, but more generally, I've tried to take a number of steps to make information about how music works available to people beyond the ivory tower of the university and beyond the locked doors of published journal articles. And there's 3 examples here, probably the 3 that have taken a lot of effort for me. The top one is a MOOC, a massive open online course, which is a free program, a free 6-week program that describes 6 different ways that you can understand how music can lead to change at an individual, societal or structural level. And that's constantly available. It's full of interviews and full of resources and access to journal articles and videos and practice videos as well, where I try to make information available to the widest public possible through this free Coursera platform. Another way that I've actively demonstrated my commitment to making information about music and its wellbeing affordances available in the world is through the Voices journal, voices.no, of which I'm now a co-editor, along with my colleagues Brynja Stiega and Sue Hadley, who both come up today, because Voices really is a forum where we actively attempt to address issues of social justice by making information available. As you can see, it says we nurture a critical edge and focus on inclusiveness, sociocultural awareness and social justice. And the 3 of us, along with a fantastic editorial team that we have there, are all committed to, again, free access to information about music. And finally, a TED Talk that I recently created, which was yet another attempt just to put information out there in the most accessible way so that people have a better understanding, particularly in this case, about the ways that we can use music to support our mental health, and also sometimes as a hindrance to our mental health, depending on our lack of awareness of that. And certainly that was a public health gesture. So I have been coming into the critical conversation mostly at the level of demanding and demonstrating for access to all people about what we know about how music works.